Hello, and welcome once again to the CanIOwn Podcast. I am your host, Art Veal, and in this podcast, we discuss different techniques and tools that can help you buy a home or at least enjoy your rental process and let that process move you toward home ownership. So today in this podcast, I'll be discussing how you can use your rent payments to help you qualify to buy a home, especially if you don't have any credit or your credit, you have a low credit score, which is one of the biggest things that hold people back a lot of times from buying a home. So let's just jump right into this. If you've ever tried to go out and buy a home and you've been turned down by a lender, uh, I would say probably 9 times out of 10, usually you're turned down because your credit is not where it needs to be. And so that can be very frustrating. And, a lot of people go through a lot of things to get their credit in order. They go to credit repair companies. They try to fix it themselves. But you actually have some tools that may help you, and you just don't know it. And one of those tools is your rent payment. If you're someone that makes your rent payment every month religiously and you keep up with your rent payments and they're always on time, then you can actually use some of that information to help you qualify to buy a home. Now, let me explain how this works. When you are buying a home, the typical process, or when you're trying to get qualified for a home, the typical process is for the lender to pull your credit, look at your money that you have in savings for a down payment, and any issues that they have, if you're close enough, but maybe you're not quite there, they'll typically ask you for letters explaining something like, let's say you've got a judgment or something like that on your credit or anything that's kind of like outside of their normal scope. They'll ask for a letter stating why that happened and any proof that supports what your letter is saying. So what you can do is you can use your rent to show stability. And rent is a great way to show stability to a bank because if you can pay rent, they believe that you're going to pay your mortgage payment because a lot of times your mortgage payment is going to be less than your actual rent payment. And at the same time, the mortgage payment has a lot more safeguards in place so that you can continue to make the payment. So if you fall behind on your rent payment, the landlord can file eviction and can have you out of the property pretty quickly in most states. But if you fall behind on your mortgage, then it takes a little bit longer, and they've got all kinds of programs to help you. And not that the lender wants to do that, but they know that if you can show stability with your rent payment, then there's a good chance that you're a stable person. And accidents happen and things happen to people, but they want people that are stable and they're dedicated to trying to make their payments. So what you can do is you have to do one of two things. You either have to pay your rent payments. Actually, you can do three things, but the first one I don't suggest really. If you make rent payments by a certified check or money order or any way like that, just keep copies of all the receipts. Now, I don't suggest this because it's one, you got a bunch of receipts. Two, lenders don't look at receipts the same way as they do some of the other things I'm going to show you. But you can use those receipts to show a payment history to your landlord. If you're paying for your rent cash, if you hand your landlord cash every month, even if they hand you a receipt, then the first thing I'm going to suggest to you is stop. Do not do that. Do not make your rent payments by cash because even if your landlord hands you a receipt, the bank really has no way to verify that you're making that payment. Banks don't trust landlord receipts. The main reason they don't trust them is because let's say you're trying to buy a house from your landlord. You're doing a rent to own. And the landlord is the one selling the house. Of course, they're going to say that you paid every month on time perfectly because they want you to buy the house and they'll make a big payday. So even if your landlord isn't the person you're buying the house from, banks are less likely to believe that you're making the payments and the only proof you have is the receipt from your landlord. I would suggest at a minimum going to a currency exchange or your bank and getting a certified funds check and giving your landlord that check. That way you have a paper trail check. Paper trails, when it comes to getting a bank loan, are one of your most important tools. You need to have a paper trail of where your money has come from and where it's going. So This is a little bit off subject, but this also speaks to the way you make your get your paycheck. If you're someone who gets paid, then the first thing you should do with your paycheck, even if you're paid cash, let's say you're paid cash for some reason, but however you're paid, you should put the money, the entire check, the entire amount in a bank account, even if it's a prepaid debit card. I don't care if you put it in and then immediately withdraw it out, because by putting it into the bank account, you create a paper trail and you can verify that income by your bank deposits. And that's something that banks will allow. But if you just take the money and cash it and then pay bills, even though you're paying your bills and everything else, and you don't put the money into an account, then they don't look at it the same way and you won't get credit for that income. And the same thing goes for rent. If you're just paying cash, you won't get credit for making those rent payments. So I would not suggest paying any rent in cash. I would always, at the minimum, I would pay it in a certified check. And the reason I say certified check over a regular personal check is because the bank oftentimes can't verify that a personal check cleared. And it's a little bit messy. A lot of times landlords don't like to take personal checks, so it would just be easier with a certified funds check. Now, having said that, that's probably the worst way to make payment. The next way that I would say is to use a rent payment system or service that reports to the credit bureaus. There are a lot of services out there. I won't go into any specific names, but you can search rent payment services, and some of them report to the credit bureaus your rent payment every month. And so that's a big benefit to you if they report to the credit bureau. Now, I personally don't like this one as much as the third way I'm going to show you, but this is a way to definitely count your rent payments to help you buy a home. The services usually charge a small fee depending on how you pay. If you're paying by direct deposit or taking it out of your account and paying the rent payment service and then they pay the landlord, I don't believe they charge for that in most cases. But if you're paying by credit card or something like that, which you shouldn't need to do, you should be paying by ACH. But if you're paying by credit card, I believe they charge a credit card transaction fee. So you can look into that as another way. And that way is better than certified check, and it's definitely better than cash. But my suggestion is you do the third way. The third way is to use an escrow service. Now, I have all of my rent-to-own tenants do escrow servicing. And an escrow service will collect your payment out of your account, usually with an ACH, and they'll make the payment to the landlord. They'll send off a check from their accounts to the landlord. But the beauty of it is that they keep everything organized. So you can call your escrow company and say, hey, I need my payment history for my rent. And here's the beauty of it. If you use the escrow company, let's say you move 3 times in a 2-year period. If you use the same escrow company, which usually they're nationwide, that escrow company can show your payment history to landlords for the last 3 years. Even though you've moved to different landlords, they'll still be able to show that payment history. Compared to the cash, obviously you can't do that. With a certified check, it's complicated to do that because you have to keep certified checks from all those landlords. Same way with using the payment service. They typically start your account over when you change landlords. But with the escrow service, you're paying payments to the escrow service, and then they're sending those payments to the landlord, and they keep your history in one place that you can then show to the bank. And the other benefit of that is that when you show that payment history on the letterhead from this payment escrow service, the escrow service, then the bank believes it because these are licensed, bonded escrow services, and they have no reason at all to lie for you. So the bank is much more inclined to believe their payment history, and it makes you look good to the bank. And it can be, if you write a letter to the bank and say, hey, I've made my rent payments every month. I'm responsible with my money and responsible with my payment history. I've just had some setbacks. Here's my payment history from the last 3 years. I've moved 2 or 3 times, but or maybe I've stayed at the same place, but here's my payment history for the last year or 2 years. Then you can show that payment history with the escrow company, and the bank will take that into high regard. That's really the strongest way to show your payment history, and it can push you a lot of times over the top to get qualified for a home loan. So that's definitely something I would consider. Now, with that, escrow companies do charge a fee usually every month, no matter how you pay. But for the convenience of that payment history and the other benefits that you get with an escrow company, like some escrow companies allow you to make payments, partial payments throughout the month, but they'll make your payment on the first. So it's almost like you can float your payments. So let's say you get paid every week and you take 25% of your paycheck every week to pay your rent. With the escrow companies, if you get the right escrow company, you can pay, 25% of your rent on the first week, pay 25% on the second week, 25% on the third week, and 25% on the fourth week, so that you paid your full rent for the month. But as far as the landlord, they'll get their payment on the first. So it doesn't show that you're not making payments. It shows that you're making your payments as you're supposed to, and you don't get charged a late fee. So it's a great benefit. Now, they do charge a small transaction fee every time you make a payment like that. But in comparison to a late fee, it's usually less than the late fee, and at the same time, you get a lot of benefit out of that. That'll help you make your budget easier. So I hope these are some things you'll consider, and you'll consider using these processes to help let your rent help you strengthen yourself financially. It'll strengthen your credit score. It'll strengthen your chances to get a bank loan, and ultimately, it'll help you make better financial decisions, because by keeping track of this kind of payment history, it strengthens you financially, which makes other things easier. It'll make it easier to get financing for other things when it's time, like a car and things like that. So consider these options. If you have questions or comments, or if you like the services that I know about, that if you'd like me to give you specific names of services that offer what I'm talking about, then leave a comment below and your contact information, and I will direct message you or email you the companies that I know of. But like I said, you can always search on your own and find a company. It's not impossible. So I hope this has been helpful for you. If you have questions or comments or topics that you'd like me to discuss or bring up in this podcast, I'm very much open. Leave your comment at the bottom of the page. Until next time, this has been Art Veal with the CanIOwn Podcast. I look forward to talking with you next time. I wish you the best and have a great day. Goodbye.